In this video, we're going to start to review some of the types of factoring that you should be familiar with. There are four main types of factoring that you should be familiar with at this point: common factoring, factoring by grouping, factoring a difference of squares, and then factoring trinomials. And there are multiple different types of trinomials that we will look at. In this video, we'll look at common factoring and factoring by grouping, and then do the others in later videos. So let's start with common factoring. Common factoring means factoring out something that is common to every term in the polynomial. So if you're given something like this, you look at 4x squared and 10x. Remember, first you look at the coefficients and what is the largest number that is a factor of both 4 and 10, and in this case it's 2. And then you look at the variables and you look at the highest power of each of the variables that you can take out. So there's an x in both, so you can take out x, which is essentially x to the power of 1. Then you have to think of what's left. So you're dividing 2x out of 4x squared. That leaves you with 2x. And then dividing 2x out of 10x leaves you with 5. So common factoring here, you'd common factor out 2x, and inside the brackets you'd be left with 2x plus 5. If you want to check that, you could always multiply back. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times positive 5 is 10x. So that works. Here's a slightly more complicated one. Now we've got 3 terms and we've got 2 different variables. Again, we look at the coefficients and we look for the largest number that we can take out of all of them. And again, it's going to be 2. Now we look at the x variable and we try and find the highest power of x that's common to all, and it's going to be x squared. And then we look at y, and the highest power of y that is common to all is also y squared. Then we write our brackets and we write everything that's left. So we've divided 2x squared y squared out of that first term. That leaves us with 4, and there's going to be 1 x left over, but all the y's are taken care of. Then we divide 2x squared y squared out of the second term. We're going to have negative sign and then a 3, or a minus sign and then a 3, and x squared y squared gets rid of all the variables in that one, so we're done there. And then in the last, we've got left over a 2 and a y. So that's how you would common factor that one. Okay? So common factoring, you pull out the factors that are common to everything out front, and then what's left in the brackets is what results when you've divided that common factor out of each term. Now, factoring by grouping is quite similar. The first way to think of it is that sometimes the common factor can be a binomial. In the examples we just looked at, the common factor was a monomial, was 1 term, but sometimes it can be 2 terms. So you see here that x minus 5 is a binomial that's actually common to both this part of our expression and this part as well. So we can pull that whole thing out, pull that whole binomial x minus 5 out front, and when we pull the x minus 5 out front, we're left with 3x plus 2. So it's quite similar to common factoring, although here you can think of this whole thing as being one common factor. And if you think of it like that, or if you imagine it sort of being put in a box like that, you can imagine, or you might be able to visualize the result a little bit more simply. Now sometimes that step's not done for you and you have to do it yourself. It's common often to see questions with 4 terms ending up being factoring by grouping. So let's take a look here. We're going to look at the first 2 terms, and the common factor in the first 2 terms is 2x, which is going to leave us with 5x minus 7y there as our first part. And in the second, if we take out a negative 3, notice that again we get 5x minus 7y. If we've taken out negative 3, we're left with negative 7y when we divide that out as our second term. And now again we have the same situation as above. We can bring that 5x minus 7y out front as a binomial common factor, and we have 2x minus 3 there left. So that's factoring by grouping. Essentially, we've common factored out of the first 2 terms, common factored out of the second 2 terms, and then common factored the binomial.